The plate shattered against the wall before anyone understood why. Adaeze stood frozen in the kitchen doorway, bowl of jollof still warm in her hands, watching red stew slide down the plaster like something bleeding. Her father's voice still rang through the house. Her mother's face had gone the colour of ash. And at the head of the table, where their father used to sit, Nkechi smiled. Small, satisfied, like a girl who just won a war no one knew she was fighting. "Your sister deserves everything first," their father said, loud enough for the neighbours to hear through the thin walls of their Houston duplex. "The house, the business, the name. You understand me, Adaeze? You will step aside." 26 years old, and Adaeze had been stepping aside her whole life. But the way her mother refused to meet her eyes, the folded paper her father slid toward Nkechi that no one was supposed to see. This wasn't a request. This was an ending. And Adaeze intended to find out why. If you are watching this from your kitchen, your car, your bed at 2 a.m. because you cannot sleep, tell us where you're watching from in the comments. Subscribe if stories about family, betrayal, and the quiet strength of the overlooked speak to you, because tonight's story is going to stay with you long after it ends. Adaeze set the bowl down slowly. She did not raise her voice. She had learned, over a lifetime of being second, that silence made people nervous in a way that screaming never did. What paper was that, Papa? Her father, Chibuzo Okonkwo, a man built like the iron gates he used to weld back in Enugu before immigrating 20 years ago, did not answer. He simply folded his arms the way he always did when a conversation was over before it began. It was her mother, Ifeoma, who finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Adaeze, please, not tonight, but there would never be a night." Adaeze understood that now. There would be a lifetime of not tonights, stretching backward through every birthday when Nkechi got the bigger cake, every school event where Adaeze's science fair trophy sat forgotten while Nkechi's dance recital photos lined the hallway, every quiet moment where Adaeze had told herself it didn't matter, that love wasn't a competition, that her parents loved them both the same. She had believed that lie for 26 years. She would not believe it for 27. That night, after the house went dark and her parents' bedroom door clicked shut, Adaeze did something she had never done before. She went into her father's study, the room he kept locked, the room that smelled of old cedar and cigarette smoke he thought no one knew about, and she began to look. She did not know what she was looking for. She only knew that a man who loved his daughters equally did not hide documents. A man with nothing to protect did not fold papers away from prying eyes at his own dinner table. The desk drawer was locked. But Adaeze had watched her father for 2 decades, and she knew where he kept the spare key, taped beneath the bottom drawer, a habit he thought no one had ever noticed. Inside, beneath old tax records and a photograph of her parents' wedding day in Lagos, she found a manila folder with her name, and Nkechi's, written across the tab in her father's handwriting. She opened it, and the first word she saw made her hands go cold. Inheritance. Before you keep watching, take a moment to like this video and let us know in the comments. Have you ever discovered a family secret that changed everything you thought you knew? We want to hear your story. Now, back to Adaeze. The document was dense, full of legal language I had to read twice to understand, but the meaning underneath it was simple, and it broke something inside her chest that she did not know could still break. Her father was not merely favouring Nkechi out of blind preference. He was transferring the entirety of the family business, Okonkwo Imports, the trading company he had spent 2 decades building from a single storage unit into a multi-million-dollar operation, into Nkechi's name alone. Not shared, not split. Alone. And at the bottom of the last page, a clause that made Adaeze's stomach drop entirely. In the event of my passing, Adaeze Chinelo Okonkwo shall receive no claim to any business asset, property or holding under the Okonkwo Imports name, as she is not, and has never been, biologically related to the undersigned. Adaeze read the sentence 4 times before her brain accepted the shape of the words, not biologically related. The folder trembled in her hands. Somewhere in the house, a floorboard creaked, and her heart slammed so hard against her ribs she thought it might give her away. She held her breath in the dark study, waiting, listening, praying. No one had woken. No footsteps came. Only silence and the folder, and a truth that rearranged 26 years of memory in the space of a single sentence. She was not her father's daughter. She thought of every moment she had chalked up to simple favoritism, the way her father's eyes softened for Nkechi in a way they never had for her, the way he called Nkechi my blood, my legacy, at every family gathering, while Adaeze stood a careful few feet away, always present, never quite included. She had told herself it was because Nkechi was the baby, the last child, the one who needed protecting. It had never been about age at all. She closed the folder. Her hands were shaking so badly she nearly dropped it, and in the dim light of her phone's flashlight, she photographed every page, every clause, every signature, every date, before returning the folder exactly as she'd found it, locking the drawer, replacing the key. She did not sleep that night. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying her mother's face at dinner, the way Ifeoma had not been able to meet her eyes. Her mother had known. Her mother had always known. The next morning, Adaeze made a decision that would change the trajectory of everything that followed. She would not confront her parents. Not yet. Instead, she would find out the truth. The real truth. The one buried even deeper than the folder in that locked drawer. Who was her real father? And why had Chibuzo Okonkwo spent 26 years raising another man's daughter as his own, only to strip her of everything the moment it became convenient? She started with her mother's old photographs, boxes stored in the garage that Ifeoma rarely touched. Adaeze had helped her organise them once, years ago, and she remembered a name scrawled on the back of a faded photo that had never made sense to her at the time. A man she didn't recognise, standing beside a much younger Ifeoma outside a church in Lagos, both of them laughing, both of them impossibly happy. The name on the back read, Emeka and Ifeoma, 1998. Before everything. Before everything. Before what? Adaeze was born in 1999. Do you feel it too? That tightening in your chest, the sense that the ground beneath this family is not what it seems. If this story is pulling something out of you, drop a comment below and let us know what you think Adaeze is going to find. Like the video if you're hoping for the truth to come out. Let's continue. Adaeze tracked the name Emeka through hours of searching. Through old family friends she called under false pretenses, through a cousin in Lagos who remembered more than she expected him to. Emeka Nwosu, her cousin Uche said over a crackling video call, his voice hesitant, as though he were handing her something fragile. Your mother's first love, before Chibuzo. Nobody talks about him anymore. Why not? A long pause. Because your father made sure of it. Uche told her the story in pieces, the way family secrets are always told. Reluctantly, incompletely, with long pauses where the truth was clearly being softened. Ifeoma had been engaged to Emeka before she ever met Chibuzo. Emeka was a school teacher, gentle, without money, without prospects that impressed Ifeoma's parents. When Chibuzo arrived, ambitious, wealthy by comparison, already building his import business, Ifeoma's family pushed her toward the better match. But Ifeoma was already pregnant with Emeka's child. She married your father within 3 months of meeting him, Uche said quietly. Everyone assumed the timeline was strange. Nobody asked questions. Your father knew. He married her anyway. He raised you as his own. Adaeze sat with the phone pressed to her ear long after the call ended, staring at nothing, trying to reconcile the story with the man who had raised her, who had taught her to ride a bike in a Houston parking lot, who had cried at her high school graduation, who had called her his small warrior every single day of her childhood until, seemingly overnight, he stopped. He had known the whole time, and he had loved her anyway, until he didn't. Something had changed. Something had made him stop seeing her as his daughter and start seeing her as a debt he no longer wished to pay. Adaeze needed to know what. She found the answer 3 days later, and it came from the last place she expected, Nkechi herself. Her sister had never been cruel by nature. Adaeze had always believed that Nkechi was simply spoiled, favoured, oblivious to the hierarchy that benefited her. But that evening, when Adaeze found her sister crying alone on the back porch, phone clutched to her chest, she realised how wrong she had been. "He's sick," Nkechi said, before Adaeze could even ask what was wrong. "Papa, he found out 3 months ago. Stage 4, he knew." The porch light flickered. Somewhere in the yard a dog barked at nothing, Adaeze felt the world tilt sideways. Why wouldn't he want me to know? Nkechi's face crumpled. Because he's trying to protect Okonkwo Imports from a lawsuit. There's a partner, Mr. Adaeze, who's been threatening to challenge the company's ownership if anything happens to Papa, because the original founding paperwork lists you as a co-heir by birthright, even though... She stopped herself, and Adaeze understood exactly what she had almost said, even though you're not his blood. He thinks if he transfers everything to me now, before he dies, Adaeze can't touch it. He thinks he's protecting the business, protecting our family's future. Nkechi's voice cracked. He thinks he's protecting you too, in a way, because if the lawsuit comes and you're named as an heir, you could be dragged into years of legal battles you never asked for. Adaeze felt something enormous crack open inside her, grief and fury tangled together so tightly she could not separate one from the other. Her father was dying. Her father had spent his final months rewriting his legacy to erase her from it, and he had told himself it was love. She thought of the folder, the cold legal language. No claim to any business asset. Was that protection, or was it erasure dressed up as sacrifice? She needed to hear it from him directly. Not filtered through Nkechi's tears, not pieced together from cousins and old photographs. This is the moment. If this story has gripped you, if you feel Adaeze's heartbreak like it's your own, take a second to like this video and drop a comment with one word describing how you feel right now. Whatever you're carrying, we see you. Let's keep going. Adaeze found her father the next evening in his study, the same room where she had uncovered the folder. Sitting in the dark with a glass of untouched whiskey and a photograph of a much younger Ifeoma in his hands. "I know," Adaeze said, standing in the doorway, refusing to let her voice shake. "About the diagnosis, about Emeka, about the folder in your drawer." Her father did not look surprised. He looked, for the first time in Adaeze's memory, tired in a way that had nothing to do with age. "Sit down," he said. She did not sit. 26 years, Papa. You let me believe I was yours." "You are mine." His voice broke on the word, and for a moment the iron in him gave way to something raw and unfamiliar. "Blood never made you mine, Adaeze. I chose you. Every single day since the moment you were born, I chose you. That has never changed. Then why strip me of everything the moment you found out you were dying?" He set the whiskey down with trembling hands. "Because Adaeze is not a man who negotiates. If he learns you have a legal claim through the founding documents, he will bury you in litigation designed to bankrupt you before it ever reaches a courtroom. I have seen him do it to better men than either of us. I could not protect you from cancer. I thought I could protect you from him. By cutting me out publicly? By humiliating me at my own dinner table? Because Adaeze is watching this family closely, Adaeze. He has people who report to him. If I quietly redistributed the company, he would know within a week, and he would come after you regardless, believing you were hiding assets. I needed the transfer to look absolute, undeniable. I needed the world and him to believe you truly had nothing left to protect." The room went silent except for the low hum of the air conditioner. Adaeze felt the fury drain out of her, replaced by something more exhausting. Understanding. "You could have told me," she whispered, "instead of letting me believe you hated me. I was trying to save your life the only way I knew how." His eyes were wet now, unashamed. "I am dying, Adaeze. I do not have the luxury of doing this gently. I only have the luxury of doing it in time." Adaeze sank into the chair across from him then, the anger and grief finally colliding into something she could no longer hold upright on her own. For the first time since she'd found that folder, she let herself cry. Not for the business, not for the inheritance, but for the years of silence between them that neither of them had known how to break. But even as her father reached for her hand, something nagged at the edges of Adaeze's mind. A detail from the legal folder she had photographed that suddenly, terribly, made sense in a new light. The document had not only stripped her of the business, it had listed Emeka Nwosu, her biological father, as a co-signer on an earlier version of the founding paperwork from 2003, which meant Emeka had known about her. And Emeka was, according to the timestamp on that document, still alive as recently as 4 years ago. "Papa?" she said slowly, her voice steadying even as her heart raced. "Where is Emeka now?" Her father's face changed in an instant, fear flickering behind grief, a door slamming shut before she could see what was behind it. "You need to leave that alone," he said. "For your own good." We're almost at the heart of this story. If you've made it this far, we already know you're invested, so subscribe now if you love stories full of unexpected twists, hidden truths, and family secrets that refuse to stay buried. What Adaeze discovers next changes everything you thought you understood about this family. Chibuzor would not say another word about Emeka that night, no matter how Adaeze pressed him. He simply repeated again and again that some doors were better left closed, that some truths caused more damage revealed than buried. It only made Adaeze more certain that the real story, the one beneath the folder, beneath the diagnosis, beneath even Adeese's threats, had not yet surfaced. She found Emeka Nwosu 3 weeks later, not in Lays as she expected, but 40 minutes away, in a modest apartment in Sugar Land, Texas. He had immigrated to the United States nearly a decade ago. He had never remarried, and when Adaeze knocked on his door and introduced herself, the man went pale and gripped the doorframe as though the ground had shifted beneath him. "You look exactly like her," he whispered. "Exactly like Ifeoma, the year I lost her." He invited her in. Over tea that neither of them touched, Emeka told her a story that unravelled everything Adaeze believed about her family's beginning. He had not simply lost Ifeoma to a wealthier man. He had been paid to disappear. Chibuzor, in the earliest days of building his business, had gone to Emeka directly, offered him a sum of money large enough to relocate to start over in exchange for one condition: that he never contact Ifeoma or the child she was carrying again. Emeka, poor and desperate and ashamed of the life he could not yet offer, had taken the money. "I regretted it every day for 26 years, Emeka said, his voice breaking. "I told myself it was for your sake, that you deserved a father who could give you a real life. I convinced myself the money made it noble. It did not. It only made it easier to live with my own cowardice." Adaeze sat frozen, holding a cup of tea gone cold, absorbing a truth stacked on top of every other truth she had uncovered that month. Her father, the man who raised her, had not simply chosen to love another man's child out of grace. He had paid for the privilege of raising her without competition, without complication, without a biological father lingering in the background to challenge his place, and yet he had also spent 26 years actually loving her. Waking at 4 a.m. for her science fair projects, working double shifts to pay for her college applications, actually crying at her graduation when the rest of the family had barely clapped. Two truths sat side by side, refusing to cancel each other out. Her father had bought his fatherhood. And then he had earned it, one ordinary day at a time, for over 2 decades. The twist was not that he did not love her. The twist was that love and manipulation had been woven together from the very beginning, so tightly that Adaeze could no longer separate the thread that was real from the thread that was purchased. We're heading into the most intense part of Adaeze's journey now. If your heart is racing, if you cannot look away, let us know in the comments, and subscribe if you crave stories where nothing is ever as simple as it first appears. Stay with us. It's about to get harder before it gets better. Adaeze returned home that night to find the house in chaos. Adeese's lawyers had arrived unannounced, papers in hand, demanding an emergency audit of Okonkwo imports before Chibuzor's condition worsened further. Nkechi stood in the driveway, shouting at a man in a grey suit, while Ifeoma wept silently on the porch steps, and Chibuzor, pale, weakened, leaning heavily on his cane, tried and failed to assert authority he no longer had the strength to hold. It was Adaeze, standing at the edge of the driveway with the photographed documents still saved on her phone, who realised she held something none of them knew about. Proof. Proof of the original 2003 fair founding paperwork listing Emeka as a co-signer. Proof that directly undercut Adeese's claim that the business's ownership had ever been legally ambiguous. If Emeka's signature was authentic, it settled the ownership dispute permanently, cutting Adaeze out of any legal foothold entirely. "Everyone stop," Adaeze said, stepping forward, her voice carrying an authority she had never once used in this family. "I have something you need to see." She showed the documents. She explained what Uche had told her, what Emeka had confirmed, What the dates and signatures proved beyond dispute. Adese's lawyer, caught between confusion and calculation, slowly realized his client's claim had no legal ground left to stand on. Within the hour, the lawyers left. Adaeze would not return. But the legal victory that mattered most in that driveway, it was the silence afterward. Chibuzo sinking onto the porch steps beside his wife, Nkechi kneeling in front of Adaeze, tears streaking her face. "I didn't know any of this," Nkechi whispered. "I didn't know about Emeka. I didn't know Papa paid him to leave. I only knew Papa was trying to protect the business from Adaeze, and I let myself believe that was the whole story because it was easier." Adaeze looked at her sister, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time in years, and saw not an enemy, but another person who had been shaped by the same silences, the same unspoken hierarchies, the same family determined to protect its secrets at the cost of its own children's understanding. "We were both used as pieces in something we never agreed to play," Adaeze said quietly. "None of this was your fault, Nkechi, and none of it was really mine either. If this moment moved you even a little, take a second right now to comment your thoughts and like this video. Stories like this deserve to reach people who need them. We're almost at the end, and the ending will surprise you." In the weeks that followed, something in the Okonkwo family shifted permanently. Chibuzo, weakened by illness but no longer weighed down by the secret he had carried for over 2 decades, sat Adaeze and Nkechi down together and rewrote the will, not to favour one daughter over the other, but to split Okonkwo imports equally between them, with a formal clause naming both as rightful heirs regardless of blood. "I built this business for both of my daughters," he told them, his voice thinner than it used to be, but steadier than Adaeze had heard it in months. "I let fear convince me that protecting one meant sacrificing the other. I was wrong. I am sorry it took dying to teach me that." Adaeze reconnected with Emeka in the months that followed, carefully, slowly, without erasing the father who raised her, to make room for the one who hadn't. She came to understand that family was not a single, simple bloodline, but a series of choices, made and remade, some selfish and some redemptive, often within the same person. Chibuzo passed away 8 months later in the spring, surrounded by both of his daughters and the wife who had loved him imperfectly but truly for 27 years. In his final days, he told Adaeze something she would carry with her for the rest of her life. "I did not give you my blood," he said, gripping her hand with the last of his strength, "but I gave you everything else. And in the end, Adaeze, that was always the greater inheritance." Before we go, if this story taught you anything about the complicated, imperfect nature of family and love, subscribe, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and comment the biggest lesson you're taking away tonight. Every family carries secrets. What matters is not whether they stay buried, but what we choose to build once they finally come to light. Adaeze often thought, in the years that followed, about the plate that shattered against the kitchen wall the night everything began, the red stew sliding down the plaster like a wound that would not close. She used to believe that moment was the beginning of her family's unravelling. She understood now that it had been the beginning of something else entirely, the first crack of light breaking through a door that had been locked for 26 years, letting the truth in at last, however painful, however overdue. Some inheritances are written in legal documents. The greatest ones are written in the quiet, ordinary choice to keep showing up day after day for a child who was never yours by blood, and to call that love anyway.